Let's have all three of you look up Mystic China. I just want to see your reactions to the cover.
Oh, that's the real cover.
That's the real cover. I already know that you've seen it because of that look of disbelief in your face.
Oh no.
Polita, if you're confused that there's like a white person on the cover, that confusion's real because that's
so much of this just doesn't make sense. I'm just so confused.
Yep, that's Mystic China.
Why is Marilyn Monroe on the cover of Mystic China?
Why is she in like a kimono style thing too? And
yep, that's the cover. And I remember being at Gen Con in 2018. 2018? Yeah. And seeing the cover to Mystic China and seeing that it's still in publication.
Oh, okay.
It's not and like they have like Arms and Armor of the Orient. They had some really bad stuff. And I remember tweeting it and then talking to the people at the booth and being like, hey, who wrote this? Because the name is Eric Wujek.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And I was like, is this person Asian? And they're like, no, this is a white guy. And they're like, but he lived in China. That was their response to me.
Great.
No problems. It's obviously it's all above board.
I just want to read the description of this book from the site.
Yeah,
and it goes, China as you never envisioned it. Ancient magic, martial art masters, supernatural predators, and the dark underworld of the mystic China as you have never dreamed.
Yep.
I would argue that they should change it to China as you have always envisioned it.
Say that.
Oh my
But
god.
Like
China as you always expected to be portrayed in things like this.
China as seen through your Caucasian gaze.
So spicy.
That's what my mom would say.
I also,
So-
Daniel, I really appreciate that you went far enough to actually at least ask if he was Asian descent, even though he has probably one of the most European-sounding names. Like, I can't say much based on my name.
Yeah,
but
based on your name.
asked, like, just to check and confirm, because you can't always read people by their name. Sometimes people marry into families and lots of stuff.
I asked because I was like, I am like 99% sure because we had this conversation when we first met in Vancouver.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to confirm.
Yeah.
Because I have been burned by this before. I had someone who I was going to get to do some art for us. And then I realized like halfway through the conversation that they were not Asian and that things about their profile made them seem Asian. And it was real awkward.
No, and like conversations are important to have, but like I saw a published list of like recommended authors that were supposed to be Asian descent, and the author didn't check that someone was actually the person of color, and the author had married into a Middle Eastern or South Asian family. And so although their name is South Asian, they are in fact not South Asian descent themselves.
Yeah, and yeah, your last name does not sound Asian at all.
No, it doesn't. It
does
does
not sound Asian at all. So right now, I feel like based on your reactions, Mystic China has to be one of the options, just because it's it's so egregiously bad. Then we have the option for Legend of the Five Rings. Is it Legend of Five Rings? Legend of the Five Rings. See, I don't play these games.
I wonder why.
I wonder why, right?
fair.
Kindred of the East or Kindred of East? I think it's Kindred of the East.
I think it's the East. I actually, a friend of mine really likes that Vampire Masquerade RPG and was asking me about playing it. And he was like, have you seen this? And I'm like, no. And so I'm super intrigued to.
There are some really problematic products in that vampire line.
Yeah, it's definitely. I opened it up and like, part of me wants to be like, who allowed this? But like,
white people.
Yeah.
Here you go.
Just gonna sit.
Oh yeah, no, it does need to be said. But it was definitely one of those like. Different people have different ages of our similar backgrounds, have different reactions to stuff like that, where he has seen folks say things like, there was nothing even approaching Asian culture when I was growing up. So I accepted this.
Yep.
And I'm like, I don't know if that's
oh no, it's only going to let me add 4 things to this Twitter poll.
Oh no.
So I have
we
Mystic
gotta pare
China.
down.
I have Mystic China / Rifts China, Legend of
Okay.
the Five Rings, Kindred of the East, and Kara-Tur, the Eastern Realms. So that's 4. We could take out Kara-Tur if we want. What do we think?
I think Kara-Tur we're gonna like touch a little bit on here.
So we'll take that one out.
Anyways,
Mm-hmm.
obviously there's a lot to say about it.
Yeah.
But I think a change of direction is good for me.
Yeah, good. Yeah. So what would be a 4th one?
So I'm thinking the Pathfinder one is pretty recent, but L5R is also, it can be pretty recent depending on which we get. So maybe we don't need the Pathfinder version on there.
I should write feng shui then.
People are gonna really push for you to get Rob on here if you do that.
I'll just invite him over to my house.
That's gonna be that'll be interesting.
Okay, so I'm gonna get this. We're gonna get this poll going soon. I think that's 4. That's 4 really solid ones, and perhaps we decide to change them. Al-Qadim is still happening tomorrow, and I know people are like hyped as fuck about that one. I'm hyped as fuck about that one.
Yeah, holy crap!
I can't wait. So it's gonna be real good. I can't wait to just sit and listen.
Mm-hmm.
I can't wait to just sit and listen. And Steve, one of us is gonna have to moderate the Twitch page because Peter isn't available tomorrow.
Yep, it'll be my honor to be
So
in
instead
that
of
Twitch
trolling the Twitter chat, the chat, Steve, you're going to be moderating it. So let's get it started. We have a couple of guests. If you've tuned into any of our video game streams, if you've just been around the Discord, you'll recognize one of these voices, one of these names. It's Drew Kwan. Archaeologist. You work at the Daniel Boone Historic House. You work in the museum industry. Second guest is someone who none of you might be familiar with if you are tuning into this, being fans of Asians Represent, being on our Asians Represent Discord, or just being a TTRPG person in general. But it is one person who you should be following. It's my friend Paulina. So I put Paulina's Twitter below. So Paulina is an archaeologist who I actually met at an archaeology conference in Vancouver years ago when I was doing another podcast that wasn't gaming related. And, we kept in touch.
Yeah.
And you talk a lot about like comics and pop culture as well. So I'm like, well, this is perfect. I need to bring somebody in who has an archaeology background, but doesn't necessarily know all of this stuff about Kara-Tur, because I legitimately want to see your reaction to this. And I sent you a little like screenshot of what to expect. And it was one of the worst things I've ever seen in this entire book. It was like, Steve, like you and I can say that we've read in incredible detail all of Oriental Adventures.
Yeah.
And this is by far one of the worst things in the book.
Oh, good.
What we're gonna get to, and it's not the. It's like a white person going up to you and being like, "Oh, ni hao," and bowing.
What's happened to me before?
That happened to me like last year.
Yeah.
Definitely had that happen.
Oh, I had a dad of one of my friends in high school come up to me and ask if my mom was Chinese, and I had to confirm to them that no, she is not Chinese, she is Filipino. And she's like, oh, good thing I didn't start talking to her in Chinese. And I'm like,
oh my god,
why did that cross your mind at all? Reading that little snippet you gave me was just like,
yeah, this shit's real bad.
Okay, this is a thing that happens. Okay.
Yeah, it's a real thing that happens to lots of people. This was a security guard at a brewery. So that was a little odd. It was a little odd. But anyways, we have a whole bunch of people here who are ready to talk about archaeology. Steve, I know you're ready to talk about archaeology as well.
Always. It's my number one passion.
Is your number one passion, aside from the world of Kara-Tur.
Oh.
But for me, I wanna quickly get into, why archaeology and what is archaeology. So all three of us, sorry, Steve, myself, Paulina, and Drew have all studied archaeology and have worked in different parts of the world. Okay? We all probably have different definitions of what archaeology is. And for each stream, I always want to make sure that it's educational. I think this is a big thing that we talked about, and we talked about this on our Discord, is that these streams are not just us shitting on this book or shitting on other books. Like, I would say it's like 50% us shitting on this book and 50% making sure that we could take this terrible product and move forward in a more positive direction. And I think that's really important. So when we're dunking on things, when we're being very critical of works, this comes from a point where we're trying to create context for us to build something more positive, more ethical, and more responsible moving forward. And that's like what archaeologists do. So for me as an archaeologist, my definition of archaeology is the systematic inquiry into the past. That's it. It's systematic in that it follows the scientific method. You are inquiring into the past. It could be it could be something that's not far removed from you. It could be you are doing the archaeology of the Vietnam War, or you're doing forensic archaeology if you're living in the UK. And again, these definitions differ from country to country. Or you could be like me and you studied something 12,000 years old in the early Holocene. So for me, archaeology is this systematic inquiry into the unknown. I worked in Jordan, Greece, and pretty much all over China. So that's me. That's where I'm coming from. This is my perspective. Let's go down below me on the overlay to Drew. Drew, tell us a bit about yourself as an archaeologist.
I have a bachelor's in archaeology from the University of Missouri, St. Louis, and my focus, mostly because we had a really incredible professor named Dr. Cosmopoulos, was in ancient Greek, predominantly Bronze Age, in studying the formation of why do political states happen in the first place? Like, how did we go from these sort of predominantly hunter and nomadic, and how did some groups sort of start evolving into different other kinds of settlements and then eventually political entities. And I look at coins a lot. So
yeah, you like coins, which is pretty dope. Mm-hmm. I once found a coin. It was the only coin I've ever found in my entire career. Digging for 8 years, and I found one coin in my entire career. I found more human teeth than I found coins. Paulina, how about you?
So I went to, so I'm a BA in anthropology from the University of Washington, and I need to make sure that goes away. And I am still working on my PhD at the University of New Mexico. I am of Filipino and Polish descent, grew up here in North America, and I say this because I study Native American boarding schools and European American orphanages here on the North American continent, and I want to acknowledge that I am not in any way descended from the people that I study, neither from the Caucasian side nor from the Native side. And I think for me, my definition of archaeology is very similar to yours, Daniel, but I like to ground it with the physicality of it. So sort of the systematic inquiry of the past through material culture, or what we have left of material culture, because I think that's what separates us from history.
Yes, definitely.
And so although I have fieldwork experience in Australia, in Washington State, in New Mexico, in Alaska, and I've visited archives all across the United States. And for my dissertation research, I actually don't dig, but I do geographic information systems. So I make maps and that sort of thing, and do spatial modeling. And there's a parallel universe somewhere where I was a geography and computer science major. But like, I'm really interested in how people use space and how that reflects culture and how that can be used to teach culture, which is the main focus of my dissertation. And I'm slowly but surely working on that.
Well, that's perfect because we're about to read a chapter written by, we know a great group of gentlemen who are teaching us all about cultures and how they're the same. So for these streams, this is what we do. We're just gonna start reading. I'm gonna start reading, and you're just gonna stop me.
It's gonna be great. It's gonna be great.
It's gonna be great. You're gonna stop me. The last time I read, there was a stream when I just kept reading, and nobody stopped me, and oh boy, was it bad.
It was that no one stopped you. It was that we were all paralyzed. But before we start reading this one, though, because it is apparently you've like primed me to be like, this is the worst, Steve. Like, this is gonna be bad. I do want to take kind of like a revisit to our 3 kind of like guiding principles and things we look for. Just because if anyone's tuning in to like the very last episode, which I know is like a very common thing to do in like these hour 25 streams, there are 3 things we do look for that help kind of guide our discussions regarding representation. So the first thing we look for are examples where the authors have decided that Asians are just generally violent and savage. We also look for Asians being represented as uncivilized and in need of saving. And lastly, we look towards Asians and their culture being objects of fetishization. So I'm sure we're going to get a bingo as we read through this pretty quickly, but it's a good place to kind of start our discussion, I think.
Okay. And okay, there we go. So the Twitter poll is live, and right now L5R is winning. But I know there are some people who are campaigning for us to get into World of Darkness. So cast your votes, and then we'll have either Steve or Peter throw that Twitter poll into our chat over here. So I'm going to start reading. Now, Paulina, I know you do GIS. There are no maps here. There are no maps here. So
I'm so surprised. I don't know what to say.
Yeah. Oh, there are maps, but of buildings. So there are no maps here. So do your. Let's do it.
Yeah. Actually, I was good before you start.
Yeah.
The pillars that Steve just said, they really ironically remind me of the stuff we're trying to get away from doing in archaeology.
I know.
But if you replace like Asian stuff with like all non-European cultures, it's like literally what so many archaeologists of color are working to try and do for the field.
Yeah.
And I was just like, oh wow, that's a lot.
Yeah. Well, like just like going to an archaeology conference, first of all, not as great as going to a gaming convention or a comic book convention or anything like that. They're honestly
you can't just bring your flask and like have a good time in the
crowd. That's what people do. That's what people do.
You can do that. There's no costumes.
Yeah, Steve, you just do you do really well.
Okay.
But
okay.
It's just
maybe I'll show up to the next archaeological con. That's what they're called, right? Cons?
Oh god.
No.
I actually wonder if people would be more respectful if we called it Archicon instead of
Archicon.
Archicon? I don't think so. It's archaeological conventions. If you go to like the Society for American Archaeology is like one of the biggest ones. The SAA conference. They're like all over like the United States. They had one at like Disney.
They did. Orlando.
Orlando. Yeah. I went to that one. It was really cool. But if you go to these conventions, they are so white. You go to these conferences, they are super white. Like the field of archaeology is super white. So, no, Paulina, I appreciate you acknowledging that. Like, while we're talking about, us, like the 3 of us being archaeologists or being former archaeologists, like archaeology as a field is extremely flawed. Mm-hmm. Extremely flawed. Even though if you think back and you think about like Indiana Jones and you look at, pop culture representations of anthropology departments and you're talking about, white people who go to Africa and do all of that stuff, that shit still happens.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That shit still happens at like the most prestigious universities in the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think for me right now, this is the most archaeologists of color I've seen in one room, virtual or otherwise, right?
Oh yeah, it's I had Albuquerque was a little bit different. That was where the SAAs were held last year.
Yeah.
But that's primarily because we are in the heart of a lot of different indigenous nations.
Mm-hmm.
And so there were lots of like tribal historic preservation officers who were in town, a lot of our students from UNM coming in. But I had a former student going around with a sign that said like, this is what an archaeologist looks like. And it was only to archaeologists of color. Mm-hmm. And it was definitely an interesting experience too, even in this place that is very ethnically diverse. Mm-hmm. Having archaeologists in town really changed the makeup of stuff.
Yeah, see, I live in the good old U.S. Midwest where yeehaw's a verb. So
this all sounds like a con, and I will tell you that costuming has its own like roots within like political statements, what have you.
No doubt.
If I showed up to an archaeological con, also Archon would be the name of it. Hire me. I would definitely wear like an Indiana Jones type like costume and like have a sign that says like this deserves to be stolen and given to a museum or something like that.
Well, Steve, you know that like there are lots of archaeologists who just normally dress like that. And I know that's what Paulina is laughing about.
Oh my lord! Oh my lord! I remember. I was
in their class. Yeah. Like, I know, like 50-year-old men who've been dressing like that for like 20 years, and that. Like it's.
I went to the Society for Historical Archaeology conference in New Orleans, and from the St. Louis airport, I saw this dude in like the long khaki pants. He had the Indiana Jones like
the
leather
fedora.
Right, and he had the satchel and everything, and I pointed him and said, "He's going to New Orleans." Guess what? Same plane.
Yep.
Saw him all over the place in New Orleans.
So this not even cosplay, Steve. This is real.
I know.
Yeah.
This is real life.
This is real life.
No. Yeah.
So that's where we're coming from when we're looking at this. So I'm gonna start reading because people are here. Like I'm surprised that I'm surprised that there are people are here because D&D Live is happening. So let's do this. Kara-Tur is the name of a vast continental area encompassing within it a tremendous range of climates, terrains, governments, societies, cultures, and beliefs. Indeed.
That's true.
So that's
Stand up.
That's the thing.
As we keep reading, encompassing a tremendous range, you won't feel like it when we're done here.
Yeah,
great.
And this is like so Paulina, there's this joke that's kind of happened since we started reading this, and there is literally a section of the book where they say in the Orient things happen, people are born, people die. It's like an undergrad writing the introduction paragraph to a first year essay.
Oh, that is so great.
It's bad.
I have definitely written something along that line.
We all have.
For sure.
So, indeed, such is its variety that to detail the continent completely would require another work of the size of this, devoted exclusively to the campaign information required. Hey, at least they didn't say it could be reduced into the next 4 pages. So there's Daniel's positive thing he said about Oriental Adventures.
Is this going to be a compliment sandwich sort of deal?
I feel like it's going to be an open-faced sandwich.
I love that. Go on.
Presented here is a general overview of the principal lands, their geographies, governments, and societies. It is given to provide the GM with a very beginning basis for an Oriental campaign. Within Kara-Tur are 4 main empires: Shou-Lung, Tu-Lung, Kozakura, and Wa. Surrounding these are a host of other political units, uncivilized tribes, tribal confederations, warlord domains, petty kingdoms, and trading outposts.
Okay, I feel like that's a really great space.
That's a great stopping point because we're going to talk about we're going to talk about the word tribes.
Yeah.
Because like Paulina, this has been like a big talking point in the D&D community because of the word tribe and their association with orcs.
Okay. Yeah. That, especially if you consider. So I recently started playing tabletop role-playing games like in the last year.
Yeah.
It's a cool thing. I went from being in 1 game to now being in like 5.
How it goes. That's how it
That's how it
goes.
goes.
Yeah, it's like, oh, I have one character. It's like, now I have 4 or 7. There's something ridiculous. But yeah, especially the known association of orcs being, unfortunately, a stand-in for Black people initially. This is a real, that's an ongoing problematic thing. And actually, whether or not anyone outside of Indigenous or First Nations groups should continue to use that term at all, I know is a big discussion in archaeology.
Yes. Huge discussion about, like, you know, descriptive words for social complexity.
Yeah. Oh, so I taught intro to archaeology a year ago. And when we got to the point in time where we had to talk about like socio-political complexity, like the book uses these terms. And so educational moment. So archaeologists historically have used the terms like bands, tribes, whatever, clans, and then nation states as a sort of rough separation, generally based on size. I mention to my students, like, this is what you will see, but this is not the words that we should be using right now. And we need to come up with better words, but we haven't yet. Also, I love that it's like vast and diverse, but there's only 4 nations.
Yeah.
Like vast and diverse 4, but like we're gonna max out at 4, and they all kind of seem like they have the same language root.
Yep. Except one is like 3 of them are like Chinese, but they tried to make it sound super Asian because they put an apostrophe between the T and the U in Tulung.
Yeah.
But that echoes like the early Anglicization of Chinese words.
Well, and these 4 main empires aren't even like that different, because each of them are really sets of 2, and it's basically good and bad China and good and bad Japan. That's we'll see in a little bit, but that's it.
You read ahead.
It's
Great.
I was told specifically not to read ahead.
Drew, you've been to enough of these that you should know not to read ahead.
Nah. But also particularly, like, if you're gonna use the term tribes, to also then contrast it, like you just mentioned, Drew, with like good and bad, you've got the uncivilized, but then also the tribal confederations, as if there is because tribe itself is supposed to imply actually a certain level of organization in a group, whether or not we're talking about the past or the present. And so the idea of uncivilized is definitely a particularly loaded term when you're talking about everyone. And so to have that immediate contrast between uncivilized, but then there's the Confederate ones, which has that implication of civilization or more organization or something that really.
But there's something that's keeping them from being civilized.
Yes, it's like if only they banded together, then we'd take them seriously.
Yeah, or they've banded together, but they don't have cities because mobility. Let's talk about mobility now, because mobility makes you less civilized than being sedentary.
I'm currently editing what will be an open textbook on archaeology, and someone made I'm not going to say who I'm working with, but someone wrote the thing like, there were no cities in North America before contact. And I was just like, that is wrong.
Cahokia.
Let's do it.
Cahokia Mountain is literally 30 minutes from my house. So.
What? That's so cool.
That's super cool. There are so many places in North America I need to see.
Come visit. Well, not now, but come visit.
I want to go to the Serpent's Mounds. Mounds.
Mm-hmm.
But the reason I bring that up is because these things, while we think of them as old, are still phrases that people continue to use and believe now. So yeah, this book was written whenever it was, but people still believe this stuff, which is why it's a problem.
Oh yeah, I mean the number of people who were on Twitter responding and be like, "Oh, can't wait to see what you think. I loved Oriental Adventures growing up."
Yeah.
Well, and I think this work, Oriental Adventures, functions in some ways similarly to when scholars write books for schools and things like that. And that is maybe those students or that teacher will go out and do their own research and find out more. But in reality, you are probably the singular source of knowledge. So for someone who has no idea about any Asian cultures, Kara-Tur becomes synonymous with Asia, because this is their academic source. This has a position of responsibility to do right by its subject, because it's probably going to be the only one that people will read.
And that's the problem with archaeology. That's also the problem with academic publications. So if you've ever gone and you've tried to buy or read an issue of an academic journal, they're behind massive paywalls. Massive paywalls. Like as university students, you get access to that. It's a part of the ginormous tuition you pay, especially in the United States. But the general public don't get to see these. So knowledge is kept within the academy and within those academic circles, and it is not widely disseminated to the public. So people aren't given opportunities to learn more and to be better. That's why I wanted to have both of you on this. Because this is essentially, not only are we talking about Kara-Tur, but we are also teaching the audience about ethnocentrism.
Okay, I feel like you can go on.
Let's go on. I'll have you know, there was one stream where we went for 2 hours and we did 3 pages.
No. That's fine, I got a comfortable chair.
Many of these form convenient alliances with more powerful neighbors, while others, feisty and rebellious, maintain their independence as best they can. In addition to these settled lands, tracts of unsettled and inhospitable wilderness are found throughout Kara-Tur, inhabited only by a few hardy settlers, bandits, dangerous headhunters, non-human societies, and monsters. Go, Drew.
So they are settled.
So they are settled. That's exactly it. That's exactly it. They are settled.
I don't get it.
because there aren't cities with big walls.
Yeah, that's not. I also love that, that term "settler" as an archaeologist has become such an important word to mention, though, because most archaeologists are settlers in North America, and if you're not doing research on your own stuff, you are not in that descendant community. And I also love this tracts of unsettled and inhospitable wilderness, as if people don't live in those now all the time. Actually, we have made environment kind of optional because we find people everywhere.
Yep.
And have for all of time, and that is.
There are people in at least in the U.S. that put their houses right on the coast and just roll dice.
Yeah,
and it's just that.
Why?
Yeah.
No, folks who build in wildfire stuff in San Diego, their houses get burned out every couple of years, and they keep building there. And I also, what I love about this too is the feisty and rebellious bit, because it's both it's one of those pillars that you mentioned about us talking about, but it's also sort of this generic thing that very racistly gets put on everything that's not white. Because that's the same thing that you hear said about Latinx folks, about Black folks as well. And so it's this descriptor that's just oh, you're non-white, you must be this.
Yep. I also love how they said all alliances with powerful neighbors are convenient. Alliances happen for many reasons. And I mean, this is all the big theme of Oriental Adventures is that it's incredibly reductive to the point of being harmful.
Oh yeah.
So let's go to geography. GIS. Let's do geography. Within the boundaries of Kara-Tur is virtually every type of terrain commonly found in our world. It has a landscape.
Days past, things happen. There's land.
There is dirt. In the far northern reaches is the land of snow demons.
Of course.
I mean, there's a lot to unpack there. A vast expanse of permafrost tundra, unbroken except for a few stunted trees and upheavals of rock. I feel like any biologist.
Wait, are the rocks on strike?
Yeah, I know, right? The rocks are I have emerged. Face me. The winters here are long and extremely harsh, and the summers are cool and short. As one travels southward out of the permafrost, the land becomes thickly wooded and swampy. Okay. I'm trying to picture this landscape in my head. Everyone in the audience, try to picture that in your head. These woods, mostly pine with a thick undergrowth of thorny berries, mosses, and ferns, are rich in wildlife: deer, moose, elk, bear, fox, rabbit, etc.
Okay. Moose is an interesting one to put there.
Yeah,
Wait, I was just like, wait, hold up. Are we looking at North America? Is this the North American tundra?
Yeah. Did Gygax like cross a Bering Strait on accident and just like, oh, what?
No,
You go the wrong way?
Like, wait a second, this is Alaska.
Yeah,
But-
he just described Alaska.
This is like also moose. Moose comes from an indigenous word and a Native American indigenous word.
Yep.
Like
What? I mean, deer is relevant to Asia because deer are very common.
Sure.
But moose. Oh. Okay. Anyways, the land gradually rises to the south until it reaches the Koryaz Mountains. That does not sound Asian at all, but Koryaz Mountains, a series of low mountain ranges. Waters flow from the north and south into this basin, forming a network of streams, lakes, and swamps, feeding the Ama River, which drains into the northern end of the Celestial Sea. During the spring months...
Hold on a second.
Okay, this doesn't make sense.
So I love that it's the Koryaz Mountains, which are probably trying to approach something that's like Turkic or Uzbek.
Mm-hmm.
But then it's going into the Ama River, which is probably linguistically not related. But then they just don't even try to continue the Asian sounding name with this. It's Celestial.
Celestial
It's just
Sea.
Yeah.
English Celestial. Like, okay. Like you're not even like quickly like open up a translate book to like pick Celestial from a different language and pop that in.
No,
like,
because of diversity. Because of
So-
diversity.
So from like a overall, like having been 100 pages of like the Sisyphusian like hell, I have found that whenever there's a Romanized name for something, generally it's associated with like goodness, civilization, things like that.
that
So
is
we'll
fascinating.
probably see Celestial Sea has like the civilized spirit folk, whereas like the Ama River is a place of like danger where you like really can't live.
Mm.
But we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah. Oh, has there been an interesting sort of have you gotten to the people descriptions?
No, we haven't gotten there yet.
Oh,
We're gonna get there because, oh boy, oh boy. Let's see, and there are things that we can skip. So if there are things that are like, this is not as, we could just skip this. I'm looking at most of this geography section. I'm like, you can tell that, that they're just kind of like, okay, this sounds Chinese. Oh, China has big named rivers. Let's do that. The Three River Basin. Honestly, I think most of this geography section is skippable, but it is worth noting, like you said, Paulina, that they really just kind of, they're just like picking different cultures to name these things. Also, without a map, this is very difficult to visualize.
Yeah, agreed.
Very difficult to visualize. And I know that in other Kara-Tur books, there were maps, but not in this one.
The last thing I'll say on geography is I did a quick scan through the rest of it, and they didn't mention bamboo once. I thought for sure we'd see like vast forests of bamboo, just not there. So, yes, it's like more like North America with like your pines and things like that. But no bamboo.
No bamboo. I'm glad they didn't stick to that stereotype.
I do like that they have like to the west and southwest the Peerless Mountains, and then they have a non-anglicized name for them. Like,
yep, I see that. The Wu Pi Te Shan
Te
Mo.
Shan Mo.
That's a very weird way of writing. That's a lot of characters too.
Yeah, but their picking and choosing of that is interesting. And I think that Steve, what you pointed out with the consistency of that, how they choose or not choose to name things is definitely worth noting.
Peter in the chat says that bamboo is mentioned in the Swords of the Daimyo a lot. Every forest you go into has bamboo. So they make up for it.
Great. That's great to hear. Thank you.
Oh,
Thank you, Peter.
Well, that's rough. That's
do you
real
need-
rough.
Do you need a break?
No.
Reading.
I'm ready to go. Okay, let's keep moving. Let's go to population. In Kara-Tur, the majority of the population is concentrated within the Three River Basin, its surrounding foothills, and on the islands of Wa and Kozakura. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. It's like all the people are in this one place, and then also here, here, and here, and then on this big island, which is clearly supposed to be Japan.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I really enjoy the just sort of ignoring of the fact that like everything from the Caucasus through the Himalayas is just non-existent, including like all of South Asia.
Yep, and Southeast Asia too.
And and Southeast. It's like let's forget that there are also other islands. Like,
Yep.
Yeah.
There's only two islands here, Wa and Kozakura.
I'm really intrigued by. Oh, so is Kara-Tur supposed to be like the one continent on the planet, or is this part of it?
It's no. This is how they describe it at the very beginning of the book. Kara-Tur, the Eastern Realms, represents, in their words, the other half of the world. So to them, there is West and there is East, and this is the East.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
yeah, it's really there's yeah.
Just watching you go like
I'm trying to articulate myself without being. There's basically the world of European D&D, and then there's Kara-Tur, which is Asia to them, and that's it.
Yeah.
And
okay.
the thing is, Kara-Tur is still canon in the D&D world in 5th edition.
Oh.
Yeah,
Okay.
and it's mentioned in the player's handbook. It's mentioned in the Dungeon Master's Guide. They talk about honor in the Dungeon Master's Guide. And the show are actually mentioned in the human section of the player's handbook.
I do remember.
And the Mulan.
And the Mulan. But that's the Mulan are like a whole other thing.
Yeah. Although they reside in a place called the Unapproachable East on the map.
And that's the title of a book too.
Honestly, I actually I've been playing D&D for a year now, but I actually haven't read all the way through the player's handbook because as an archaeologist and as a woman of color, it was really hard to actually read a lot of that and not be like, this is just racist.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I have been very selective about my reading of the book because
honestly, when like playing tabletop role-playing games and not just D&D, pretty much anything, you really just need to know how to use the rules, make a character, and then the rest is entirely up to you. So you're probably better off not reading the rest of it.
Yeah. Anyways,
I'm so happy because just like seeing a lot of my archaeology friends play, because I know like you started playing and then Chris got really into it.
Yeah.
So shout out to my friend Chris. If you're interested in learning more about archaeology, he has a podcast called Go Dig a Hole. And it is a very good archaeology podcast. And it's an archaeology podcast for archaeology students and non-archaeologists. It's really good. Honestly, I feel like if any company got a whole bunch of archaeologists who game together, they would write a really good campaign setting.
We could do that if you don't already have a cajillion freaking things to do, Daniel.
No, I've got another thing that I want to do with you. I've got another like project that we're gonna do. I've talked to Chris about it already. I'm gonna get in touch with you about it.
Okay. But yeah, no, let's. Oh, also, I do love that they talk about like there's 4 nations, and then it's like, oh, but all of them are actually concentrated into this like one little river valley.
Yeah.
Like, wait, what?
Well, because in the world of Kara-Tur, this is Kara-Tur. All of the people are here, and then this is all uncivilized land.
Also,
all uncivilized land.
Unsettled, except when it's not.
Yeah,
it's all
clearly settled. Thank you, Drew.
It's unsettled by the civilized people.
Yeah.
That's how they see it. Okay. Okay. Centered on the Three River Basin and extending to the west and the north is the Sholung Empire. To support its massive population, nearly all arable land of the basin is used for farming, while herding and some small
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Huh?
Farming and agriculture are the same thing.
Amazing.
Is done in the Chukay Plateau. That's fucking stupid.
I'm so confused by this already.
It's like they farm here, but then they also farm here. But here's where they exclusively farm, but they also farm here.
I'm having a great time.
Also, like, you can't farm land with like one dude. So like,
Yeah, I don't know what they mean by
those would need to
small
be highly
agriculture.
settled areas to support that, because you need a lot of farmers.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Like, that logically doesn't follow.
There's like, so this project that I want to do with you and some other archaeologists is I basically want to get a whole bunch of archaeologists and we're going to write a zine. And it's just going to be a collection of essays, adventures, class options
Mm-hmm.
written from the perspective of archaeologists.
Oh, yes. Yes.
I've already got the ball rolling on this one. I'm just collecting names and you are one of them.
I'm trying not to read ahead, but I really want to.
I mean,
would you like to start reading?
Would you like to start reading?
Oh, sure. Where were
We're at
we?
the Peerless. The Peerless
The
and
Peerless and the
Corias.
Corias Mountains are mined for valuable ores that are sent downstream or over land. Along the southern and southwestern side of the Three River Basin is the Empire of Tulung. Here again, farming is practiced primarily along the banks of the Fengshinzu, while
Yeah.
farming and lumbering are common in the southern hills. To the north, in the Ama Basin, live tribes of nomadic hunters who practice little farming but raise herds of elk and reindeer. Are they pretending that that's
Do
the
they-
Sami?
I think so. It's this is here's the thing again where we see this dichotomy between farmers and hunter-gatherers.
But also, are these hunter gatherers? Because it seems like
But they're
they're pastoralists.
pastoralists.
Yeah, so it's like
But what they're trying to say here is like, oh, they raise herds of elk, but these people, they even say nomadic hunters.
I just love that because, like, even folks who rely mostly on hunted meat gather stuff.
Mhm.
And, like,
Yeah.
also, I feel like it's good to point out that. Steve, do you know what a pastoralist is?
I was going to interrupt.
Oh, yeah,
Please
sorry,
define
Steve.
pastoral for me. It's just for me. No one in the audience. Just
No,
me.
no, this is
sure,
just for
sure.
Steve.
All right, chat, mute yourself, chat.
Just close the stream. We're just talking to Steve.
Pastoralist. Please go on.
Anybody, go ahead.
Okay.
I need
So-
to rehydrate.
So when we're teaching about like ways that people procure food in the past and present, we talk about like mobile hunter gatherers, which is a requirement to have hunting and gathering. And then you will have what we call occasionally horticulturalists, which is sort of small scale plant management where people tend to be more sedentary, but you still have a lot of hunting going on. And then sort of parallel to that, we have what are called pastoralists, which are people who do a lot, who are mobile, and they focus more on sort of domesticated herds of animals. So we have, I think there's still folks who do this around the world. So oftentimes it's cattle.
Okay.
It can be reindeer in the case of the Sami, who are an indigenous group native to Sweden and Norway and Finlandish.
The Scandinavian.
Yeah, and then at the most intense sort of like most energy per square plot of land, you have agriculture, which is you don't hunt very much and you are like putting a lot of effort into making plants grow.
And it's usually one thing. It's
yeah,
usually one
because
thing.
horticulture you can see as sort of a supplement to your diet, but agriculture is like you are generating some sort of wealth, usually by trading. You produce lots of excess food to then trade with someone else for whatever else you need.
Yep.
And when we say they're domesticating these animals, are they like doing anything to like decide how they breed, or are they?
Oh,
really
this
just,
is
like,
this is
letting
a whole other thing.
So
I'm so
This is
I'm
a
so
whole
sorry.
other thing. You're
I'm
talking
so
to
sorry.
the person. When you're talking about domestication, especially if we're talking about animals or we're talking about plants, we're talking about creating a symbiotic relationship between the agriculturalist, the humanity and nature, where nature becomes entirely dependent on humans in order to propagate themselves. So, for instance, there are a lot of fruits out there that are no longer wild and are completely dependent on humans to thrive and survive, like peaches, which are all like clones, things like that. I mean, like, even if you look at things like, well, rice. If you look at wild rice, like in the case of North America, wild rice, as it grows in places of like very moist places, the rice actually pops when it's ready to spread its seeds. But if you think about Asia and you think about videos of people who are actually harvesting rice in China, they're actually beating it. They're threshing it, right? And even in North America, they hit it into the canoes and things like that. But in China, they'll like hit rice stalks to get the little grains out, because the grains are actually incapable of detaching themselves from the plant.
Oh.
Yeah, so they depend on people to do that, because the people will then plant the rice so they can have more rice.
Yeah. The North American example that's very similar to that is teosinte to corn.
Have you ever seen ancient corn, Steve?
I'm sure I have when I've
it's tiny.
gone to museums and they like pass it around, and like I was like, I don't know, 6.
It looks like there's like 8 little kernels on it.
Yeah.
I posted in our Discord a side by side of undomesticated cabbage and modern day domesticated cabbage.
Oh,
and that's just wild.
There's also a really interesting thing that they're saying right here, and this is something that I know only an archaeologist would catch. They're saying that farming is a far more civilized and efficient way of life than hunting and gathering. And most studies will indicate that that is the exact opposite. A lot of people think that, and this book and most tabletop RPGs will actually portray hunters as people who are living very hard lives. People who are spending all of their time on the verge of starvation, trying to get food, when that's actually not true. And
this
a lot
is
of
so cool.
And a lot of hunting and gathering societies, they have so much damn free time, whereas farmers are on the grind all the time.
That is totally like my vision of like when you say hunter gatherers, people like who like move mobily with like animal herds and things like that. I absolutely think that like they're like, oh my god, all their time must be devoted to like this to eating. But you know what's a really good, very simplified article, and it's in many ways oversimplified, but there's an article, if you just go on Google and you search for the worst mistake in human history, Jared Diamond wrote this article. And we'll say a lot about Jared Diamond. I know. There's a lot wrong with Jared Diamond, and this is and that's why I'm saying this. This is my warning. It's a very sensationalized article, very sensationalized. But it sure is.
In the article, it does say like, oh, this is the downside to farming, and which is what a lot of people don't think about, and that's the only redeeming part of that article.
Yeah, because if you think about like this, as a farmer, if you're spending your entire year trying to grow some sort of grain, and that like gets ruined by some means, whether it's flooding or by locusts or by any other sort of parasite or thing getting into your crops, you're fucked. Like you're done.
Yeah, or how about
what are you supposed to do?
Or how about this? Say you're farming, you're sedentary, you're in one spot, and you are participating in these vast empires that we're talking about here. Therefore, you need to also participate in the economy, or there is some sort of centralized leadership that is actually taking from you a tax, right? You are producing one crop. That means that you have one thing that you can eat, that you grow. That means you have to supplement your diet with other things. So you have to rely on either other farmers or people who maintain herds or just animals in general. So farming, in its most ancient sense, is very unhealthy in this highly industrialized version that they are trying to depict here. Because in North America, that case is very different. But in ancient China, if you're just making rice, which is what they're implying here, if you're just farming rice, imagine if that's all you have. Like Drew said, if all you have is rice and you have no other means of procuring meat or other vegetables or sources of nutrition, what are you gonna do?
I think my favorite part about the transition between mobile hunter-gatherers to farmers is the health effects. That actually, when you go down to, particularly with corn here in North America, you see an increase in health problems, particularly things like cavities, when people start relying more on corn. Also, I think, so what's coming up in this next paragraph feels a little bit like George R.R. Martin took these two sentences and then turned that into... Oh, no. I can't remember them now. Why can't I remember their names?
I've never read Game of Thrones.
Are you talking about like the people who like walk with horses and things like that?
Because to the west,
the Jason
in the
Momoas.
desert of horses,
the Momoas.
there's several tribes.
Oh, the what's it called? The Dothraki.
Yes,
yeah,
the
that's
Dothraki.
it.
Yeah, because they are.
I know things.
The Jason Momoas.
The Jason Momoas.
Yes, the Jason Momoas.
People know what you're talking about.
That was the prompt. I wouldn't have gotten it if you hadn't said the Jason Momoas.
Yeah. But yeah, so to the west in the desert of horses, also not a different word, just horses, just typical horses, live several tribes of nomadic horsemen joined together in a loose confederation, which is apparently the only way that you can have horse peoples together. A strong leader has recently appeared among them and is gradually wielding them into a fierce warrior nation.
I wonder who that's supposed to be.
See, Tolkien was like, what do you think Tolkien said about the Rohirrim and the Riders of Rohan? Were they civilized? I think in Tolkien's eyes, they were civilized. But here in the East, if you're riding horses and your entire culture is based on horses, you ain't civilized.
Oh my gosh.
I could. Do you want to keep reading, or do you want me to start reading?
I can go.
Okay.
On the lower end of the peninsula, to the northeast of the Ama Basin, are several petty kingdoms, tributary states of the Shou-Lung Empire. On the islands between the peninsula and the islands of Wa and Kozakura are several tribes of primitive fishermen and hunters. Wa and Kozakura are populated by a people different from those found on the mainland, most likely an offshoot branch that settled the islands in ancient times.
Oh boy.
South of the Three River Basin, the human population gradually thins out until there are isolated tribes living in the jungles. Those along the coast trade extensively with the more civilized north and have formed several small states that pay tribute to Lung or Shou-Lung. Deep in the jungle are the remnants of an ancient empire that once held sway over all the southern lands, ruled by a race of evil snake creatures, possibly Yuan-Ti. This empire corrupted and transformed several of the human groups it came in contact with.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I hope they are trying to say that's Southeast Asia.
Yeah, so from my understanding of this initial iteration of Kara-Tur and Oriental Adventures, this initial stab at the whole concept, that paragraph is all of South and Southeast Asia.
Okay, cool.
And that's about as much as we're going to devote to that for this book.
Cool. Thanks, Gary. So let's go to Shou-Lung. I can start.
I'm like, what's also really like frustrating about that, as someone who's Southeast Asian, or occasionally got the question from other folks who were East Asian descent of whether or not I was actually Asian, because the Philippines is not on the continent, is that this also buys into a lot of stereotypes that unfortunately exist within the Asian American community about civilization between the different existing nation states.
Well, Ali Wong has that joke about fancy and jungle Asians.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's like it definitely there's hints of also the term jungle that was so politicized, particularly in the United States, to demonize people from a variety of places, but definitely used during the Vietnam War era.
I mean, I'm genuinely surprised that, up to the north you got the snow demons, and down to the south you got the jungle demons. I'm surprised they didn't even like. I'm surprised at that little bit of restraint.
I'm surprised there aren't rice demons, to be honest.
I feel like that would be so fantastically hilarious. Like that would be just like that would have been too far for them, which I think is the funniest part. They didn't realize that this was too far. But also they ruled by a race of evil snake creatures.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And then like especially because like that was just a trope that came out in something in the last like 2 years.
So when you all did that section on magic, and there was all those anti-snake or anti-serpent spells and stuff, it's because the southern part of Asia is coming to get you.
There was this whole part of the book, Paulina, where they talk about making like, snakes semi-erect, and like that's what it says.
I had a great time.
Steve had a great time.
Sure, yeah.
But it was literally about charm.
Why not fully? Why not fully erect snakes?
Oh, I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why they're not fully erect. They're not fully erect because they're swaying because they are charmed using a flute.
That's not what I was thinking.
Also, I still
Steve,
love
you just look disappointed.
I'm having a great time.
But like, yeah, no, I love, Drew, that you pointed out that this is like the one paragraph that we get on Southeast Asia, still ignoring the fact that like you have all of South Asia, you have India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, all of those things are just whoopsie daisies.
So when we talk about things like how problematic Oriental and Orientalism is this book is showcase number one, because what they really mean is just two places, Japan and China. And everything else doesn't matter.
I also find it fascinating that in their kind of integration between like the populations and the geography is they ignore coastal settlements.
Yep.
Like the port cities that were eventually part of colonialism that we see in East Asia are all port cities. And they just ignore that. It's like, oh, we've got the 3 basins and then I guess some land and then these 2 islands.
You know what's probably the most egregious thing right here is that if you go, so we're just, I'm going to finish up the end of page 136, but if you go to page 137 and you see all these different nations, what has the most text? The Gaijin.
Yep. Oh my gosh.
And that's like a whole other thing. Also, look at all these new subs, Steve.
Hey,
we just so happen. I saw some emotes being thrown in, and I'm like, some of those emotes are really great. So I just wanted to give out a couple of subscriptions here so y'all can see them. So
subscribers on Twitch, we have custom emotes now. You can get the Steve reading emote. You can get the Daniel going, what the fuck emote. Or you can get my favorite, the why Gary emote.
I feel like there's a lot of situations where you might.
Yep, there we go.
There it is.
Also, I really love the Shoulung's translation for what it means.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I'm
moderately erect snakes.
Yeah, there's stuff I'm gonna read into that, but actually I want to talk about the word possibly UNT and like how that really like hits me, because not from an archaeological standpoint, but from like a sensitivity standpoint, and like the idea of causing harm. That particular line right there is very important, because what it's done is it's told the GM, it's almost like tip the hand, where it's like, you could use UNT, but I'm gonna let you kind of like see what we've done here and give you the opportunity to like build something off of what we've already told you. Unfortunately, when that happens, and based on all the other 100 pages we've read, the trajectory is way off. The text has actually taken the GM and pointed them towards the direction of harm. And by putting in possibly UNT, what you've done is you've enabled now the DM to cause harm with their table. And that's just like, if you had a sensitivity reader or something like that, they would catch that. And they would be like, you know, first of all, there's a lot of other problems, but what you've done here, you've actually exasperated and like made this even worse. If you had just said the evil race of snakes is the UNT, you've actually kind of like scoped down the harm here. But no, you've actually kind of like opened up the door for a lot more terrible things to happen. And like ethically, you should remove that.
Yeah.
And I think also extending from that, when it says that this empire corrupted and transformed several of the human groups, I feel like it's because the main focus point is this sort of pseudo-China and pseudo-Japan. I feel like it's keeping along these lines of like China and Japan are ancient and mystic and unchanging, you know, and so we don't want our pure romanticized version to be corrupted, and so these Yuan Ti are going to come in and do that, and I'm like, ugh. I don't know.
because we don't want the foreign invaders. We don't want the people from the other half of the world to be to be a threat to them. They're already in peril and they need saving.
So this is something that I find really interesting. So people have talked about how if you don't have a diversity of human cultures, elves are the stand-in for particularly East Asians. And I have been considering whether or not you see a race like the Drow as Southeast Asians. And thinking about that in relation to this phrase here, you're talking about Southeast Asia and you're talking about them being corrupted and transformed, which is the same narrative that we often see with the Dark Elves.
That's true. That's true.
And so I, you know, people play different characters whether or not they're associated with themselves or not. And I've been wondering how you, because they don't talk about mixed race people well in D&D. Half elves are very poorly explored. But I've been thinking about, like, so if I was to play a character that's not like using one of the human races, but exploring, leaning into that character development, a half drow character, if I want to go that way, how do I navigate that problematic aspect in that character? And particularly with this having the very similar sort of narrative of like, oh, they were great, there were things that were great about them, but then they were corrupted and can no longer be seen as great or associated with these other quote unquote great civilizations. It's kind of a
that's a whole other episode.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. It's worth bringing up, and I'm glad you bringing up as somebody who is newer to the scene and newer to the hobby, because it's something that people have been talking about for years.
Well, and even like making those comparisons aren't necessarily new even for the writers, because as much as I love Tolkien's work, Tolkien describes in a letter that the orcs are like those Mongol types. And I'm just like my mind is blown, you know. So it's not like these writers aren't aware of some of the things that they're making comparisons with. You know, it's not like it's purely ignorant and just them tossing things in, and it's totally just subconscious. They're not consciously aware of it, you know.
I think a lot about how so many things that we take for granted in modern culture started in sort of 1960s Orientalism, and they've just been sitting around since then.
Oh yeah, I just saw something and I was like, this is really bad.
Why don't we keep reading then? Because I just realized that we spent a lot of time on page 1.
We're still on page 1. Okay. It is the oldest state of Kara-Tur and has been in existence for over 1,200 years. I don't know why they think that's supposed to be a long time. It's not a long time.
Because they're European.
That's right. That's right. Because they're European. In one form or another, it has been ruled by an emperor for all of its history, except for a few periods of turmoil. Who's going to be in charge? People would declare themselves emperor first of all. The head and center of the state is the current emperor Qin, spelt the white way, of the Kuo dynasty, the 8th dynasty to rule the land. The bureaucracy he heads is manned by thousands of officials, major and minor, chosen by a system of examinations given throughout the land. Thus, within Shoulung, it is possible for even the poorest commoner to rise to an influential position, provided he is talented enough and studies hard, aka the model minority.
It's the American dream.
Yeah.
We don't like education that much. What are you talking about?
No, not at all. Shoulung is divided into 14 provinces, each headed by a governor. The provinces are in turn divided into districts, and also with its own official. Okay, let's just skip this. Provinces are connected.
So I'll mention something about Qin of the Kua. So Kua is the first word in the Kua-Toa, which is a fantasy race in D&D.
Oh shit! No, it's Kuo. I think that's an O, not an A.
In the race it's Kuo.
Oh, okay, cool. I didn't know that. Kua-Toa. You're right. Yeah.
Kua-Toa. It's a race of fish people. They may not be related. They're a race of fish people who see divinity in mundane things. So they are often like the butt of jokes because they see things in nature and decide that is a new god and begin to worship it. So I think maybe there might be a connection. I do not know for sure, but I can't help but look at that word, the exact spelling of it, and how it relates to a fantasy race that is clearly a misrepresentation of way people see like certain spirits and how they like perceive divinity.
Now, at the time of this being written, did Kuo-toa exist though? Or were the
I don't know if that's we can look that up, and I'm sure there are going to be people who write on the YouTube comments be like, the Kara-Tur existed before this. It was in an unearthed arcana.
Sure. Sure. You got me. Cool. Let's move on.
Okay, so we have the receiver of the dragon. First of all, like
the dragon's what?
Yes, first of all, but lung. For the dragon in Chinese is long. Let's be honest. Okay, anyways, let's move on. Also show, that could mean so many. That could mean like longevity. That can mean to teach. That could be to accept and receive, and to sell, depending on how you say it with your accent. There are all other ways to say it as well. Anyways, Earth Dragon, the Tulung, was part of the Shoulung until dispute over imperial succession 300 years ago, claiming its own emperor. This contradicts the Shulung, first of all. They say there are periods of turmoil where there is no emperor, but then I just said people would claim to be the emperor. Anyways, after many years between the two states, the situation has stabilized. No love is lost between the two empires. In the wars of succession, the emperor of Tulung was supported by powerful officials and nobles of the rebelling provinces. This led to their acquiring great power and strength. Although the government is modeled after that of Shoulung, the emperor of Tulung, the Lui dynasty, has never been able to break the power of his nobles. Thus, they control the examination system and have arranged for various offices to become hereditary. Furthermore, their power has allowed them to exempt their estates from most imperial edicts, including taxation. Now the emperor can only enforce his edicts with the consent of the majority of the nobles. Commoners have little chance to rise in the government, and corruption of official posts is common.
I feel like we have perfect China, or perfect not China, that the players can go to have a good time. And we have really, really bad not China, which the players can go fix.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
like best of both worlds. You got the cake, and then you can eat it over here too.
It's like puppet leader in Tulung, or emperor who's obsessed with bureaucracy in Shoulung. First of all, these are both like very uninteresting. Like if you're reading this book and this was your introduction to the world,
it's a snooze fest.
Yeah, I think what's actually really funny about this is that actually reminds me more of like American meritocracy systems.
Yeah.
like so you think you can move up, but actually no, you can't, and everything's hereditary. Because,
joke's on you, nepotism. Okay.
But also, yeah, this is like super boring.
Super boring.
Yeah, it's like, oh, you know that like there's more to nation states than government, right? There's things like culture and art.
Yeah. No, that's not here. That's not here.
Oh, is there?
No, I'm just saying that's not here. They're not showing that here. Maybe they did later. Who knows? But it's probably going to be paper walls, folding fans,
origami.
Did you know that in this book, Paulina, chopsticks are listed as a weapon?
Okay.
And there is a magical item called the paper of folding, and in order to use it, you have to be proficient in origami.
Okay.
But if it's magic, shouldn't it do it for you? Like, what's the purpose of like magic origami if it's not doing it for you?
I know, right?
I'm also like kind of upset because like China has, depending on whose history you're reading about China, it's more like they took everyone surrounding them and glommed them together rather than like breaking off. And there's so much regional diversity that is just completely and utterly like.
Yep.
Not like.
Okay, so I'm gonna say, producer Daniel, we're gonna go back and we're gonna continue reading because we're gonna finish this book today.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Okay, let's do it.
Okay,
take us.
Let's do it because Wa, the island of Wa is a unified military state. Although there is an emperor, the title is honorary and real power rests in the hands of the shogun or barbarian suppressing general.
Just keep going, Daniel. Just keep
Hey,
going.
let's keep it. The shogun is always a member of the Hidetomi family. The island is divided into fiefs, granted by the okay, this is just feudal Japan. Skip. Within Wa, the status of the warrior, particularly the samurai, which is a class in this book, particularly the samurai, has been raised above all others. Each daimyo, do it for the daimyo, each daimyo maintains a household of samurai paying them a stipend of rice in return for their service.
What?
They get paid in fucking rice.
So I'm pretty sure that like there might have been a few shogun who tried this and they immediately got murdered. Like, you know what? People don't like being paid in just 1 grain.
They get paid in
Actual payment.
They get paid in fucking rice, which is
Wait, did we no, we haven't
No,
gotten...
we didn't get to that part yet. We didn't get to the rice bit yet.
Okay.
I want to get paid in honor, so
Oh, but you can, because honor is actually a thing. You have an honor score in this version of D&D.
yeah.
And you could gain or lose honor depending on what you do. It's real bad.
Do you also just fight for your family and to protect your...
You could fight for your family or your many wives, because in this game, women are only sources of children for the men. It's real bad.
Are all like women referred to as like concubines or geishas? Because like that would feel like it's.
They didn't mention geishas, but they just don't mention women at all, except in the marriage section. So,
And the seamstress.
the seamstress and seamstresses.
Mm-hmm.
So Genesis of Legend in chat said that yes, Goto did exist before OA.
Probably intentional racist connotations. Genesis of Legend, also a really cool, really great dude. Designer from Canada in Ottawa, Jason Pitt. Shout out to you. Go by Sig, Manual of the Primes. That's a really beautiful cover, by the way. Unfortunately, we're not reading that here. It's not an Asian book. Let's see. Rigid laws, social structure, walled cities. Okay, this is just feudal Japan. I totally thought Kozakura was going to be that. But Kozakura, little cherry blossom.
Cute.
They also didn't say what wa means. They just call it wa. With no translation, is inhabited by the same race of people as found in Wa and shares virtually the same customs. Okay. However, Kozakura is far from a unified state. For several centuries, it has been the scene of incessant warfare between powerful daimyos. Okay. Kozakura is just one period in Japan's history, and then Wa is just supposed to be Japan.
Like I said, you have the porcelain plate version, the nice pretty version of China and Japan that you put in the cupboard that maybe your players can see, but then you have the actionable ones, the poopy ones that you can go and venture in. Like it's literally like
ones.
It's literally like let's have them at their best and them at the worst, so you can go do things in the worst one.
And that's definitely supported by the last sentence in this paragraph. As such, it is the perfect place for the adventurer seeking fame and fortune.
Exploit political turmoil. That's what they're teaching you to do.
They literally they talk about Kozakura like it's a dungeon run.
Yes.
Like what?
Oh God. Okay, let's just move on from Kozakura to Gaijin. Steve, do you want to read Gaijin?
Sure. I will also mention that we talked earlier on the stream about the Romanized translations. Wa doesn't have one. We talked about how that usually generates like goodness versus badness. Wa being the military state, and then everyone else being like this idea of like wanting to save them, more or less.
Well, Kozakura is in need of saving, and
they're in need of saving.
Wa is just
it's in need of murder.
Well, you would say that Wa is in need of saving as well, because everybody is just so tightly controlled.
They're tightly controlled, but it's like a unified military state. It implies that everyone is like here for violence.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's a good point.
These are all like pieces of the subtext, which is like subjective to every single reader. So a reader might not see that. However, I will say that as I read it, that is the impression I get, and it's not a good look. Gaijin. Speaking of not a good look, Gaijin.
with so much more information.
So I learned on the stream that Gaijin means outsider, more or less. The first sentence is not very relevant. However, these lands are very different from those of the standard classes of fighter, magic user, cleric, and thief. The lands described in this book are insular and closed. They avoid contact with the outside world when possible. True, trade exists from the outside world, but is infrequent and carefully controlled.
You know, like the Silk Road didn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
Furthermore,
most of medieval fashion is actually Asian fashion.
Yeah.
Like those big princess hats.
Yep.
Did not originate in Europe.
Or, you know, like all of Padme Amidala's outfits in episode 1 of Star Wars.
Oh, let's not let.
That's a different one.
Yeah,
there's an Asian Reed Star Wars situation going on, and that's like in the future.
Oh, you know, Asian Reed Star Wars would actually be positive because there are some really good Asian characters in Star Wars.
What?
Dr. Afra. Dr. Afra.
Dr. Afra is written by Alyssa Wong now.
Okay.
Dr. Afra is an Asian rogue archaeologist who travels around with her 2 killer droids.
Mm-hmm.
Just badass.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, she's finally written by an Asian woman now.
Yep.
I can't help but think of like Jedi and that weird pseudo like philosophy they have, and I'm like, that smells real funny.
Yeah, there's a lot to say there.
Yeah. Anyways, true trade does exist with the outside world, but is infrequent and carefully controlled. Furthermore, many ply the sea lanes and caravan routes with gold and treasures, only to disappear at the hands of bandits and other more cruel dangers. Asia is dangerous. The result of this separation has left the inhabitants of the Oriental Adventures lands with 2 peculiar traits. The first is the lack of curiosity about the rest of the world. To most people of the Oriental lands, the outside world is filled with rude and hostile barbarians.
I mean,
no one has
I know. Yeah.
As such, they are not dealt with, having nothing of value to offer. This leads to the second of their traits, the belief that they are superior to the Gaijin, that all Gaijin are below the level of culture and refinement of their lands. I need a sec.
This is just like, I'm really upset that these Asian people don't want to talk to me or accept my culture.
Yeah, I really feel like
therefore they think we are bad.
Mm-hmm.
It's like Yellow Peril to me.
100%.
Like,
yeah,
and it's like I can go tongue cheek like, haha, like these white people think like Asians are like very elitist, blah blah blah. But at its core, the spore of that, like the root of that, the seed of that, is Yellow Peril. People that will destroy you.
The next line, therefore, when other character classes enter Oriental lands, perhaps by a long sea journey or arduous overland trip, they will discover that their level and character class has little meaning to the Oriental population. Instead, they are Gaijin, uncivilized outsiders. As if, like, when somebody comes in, hello, I am a level 5 thief. People are like, shut the fuck up.
Yeah, I think
what
in
language
most
are you
cultures,
speaking?
I think in most cultures, you're gonna get told to back the fuck up. Like,
I love the idea that like there aren't fighters or because fighter and magic user is super general, or cleric even, where it's just like
well, cleric is more. I think if you talk about cleric and the clergy and Asia, I think that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah, but it's or like they don't have thieves.
Yeah. Well, I think this is one of those cases where they're talking about the game mechanics.
Yeah,
I disagree, because the thief aspect is wrapped into the fighter aspect of the Oriental lands.
No, the thief is the ninja.
I disagree. I think the thief, the idea of like stealing and like being kind of like a roguey kind of like anti-hero, is embodied within the fighter class, which is the Bushido. I think it was the name of it. The Bushi. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Steve, you don't even know this book. Do you even play Oriental Adventures?
Kick me off the stream. Yeah.
But it's just like those are so like those classes are so general. This seems kind of they're definitely probably talking about the gaming mechanics, but it also kind of feels like it's so unnecessary because it's like basically
they're trying to create a sense of other.
Yeah, that's super fair. It also makes no sense because like what is one thing that people tend to typically think of when they think of like the few people that we get in Asian popular media are martial artists, and they say that like fighters make no sense.
No, because martial artists don't use weapons, and in D&D fighters use weapons, which is also stupid.
Which is also wrong.
It's also super wrong. Let's keep going. going. I'm gonna push us along. along.
The next paragraph I'm gonna skip. The crux of it just contradicts the last sentence.
Yeah.
Where it says if you're a fighter and you're very competent, then you might be seen as like a samurai or like other equivalent honorable title. which completely contradicts the last sentence, which says all gaijin are outsiders and never.
Also, that like just because you're good with a weapon doesn't make you a samurai.
No.
Maybe in this
But-
world it does.
Yes.
Again, Asians only like appreciate like savagery and violence, so we see
But
that.
also honorable savagery and violence.
Oh yeah,
Yeah. Except for the Oriental barbarian, apparently.
yeah. I'm gonna skip the next paragraph. The various non-humanoids in other adventures are more unusual to the people of the Oriental Adventures, whereas the other gaijin are at least human. These are totally unknown. They are often mistaken for hairy men or spirit folk. So here they're talking about like dwarves and
Yeah.
like halflings.
But they just talked about snow demons and snake people.
But here's the one thing that this paragraph is saying. This paragraph is saying that Asians are racist.
Yes.
Because they either see them as dangerous and evil or that they're a novelty. Which is just crap. Let's move on to daily life because this contains the worst paragraph in the entire book.
Before we go into that, I just have one thing that's about the racism and like how it's portrayed on the Oriental folk here.
Yes.
And it is for me, it is very clear that that's written so that white people can be like, at least I'm not as racist as it. Like it really coddles that white fragility of like, oh, at least I'm not as bad as these people, and like you can go on being terrible, and like that, I see that. Anyways, sorry. Let's continue on to the worst paragraph. Great.
Okay, so let's skip
Sorry,
this.
Paulina.
Let's
Yeah,
skip this section before dress because it's not really that important. But this is where we're talking about customs. They talk about the rice farmer hat in dress. This is a thing. So in Kara-Tur, as in nearly all lands, men and women wear clothing. It's a statement. That's a statement.
Days past, things happen, people wear clothes.
In the Orient, people wear clothing. For the most part, this is a matter of practicality.
Okay.
A necessary device to keep warm and dry. Clothing also provides a second and almost as important service, identifying the rank or status of the wearer.
Oh my god. Are they going to talk about caste and not talk about India?
Yep, they're not going to talk about India. No.
But they're going to, okay, that's fine.
Nearly all clothing is decorated in dyed patterns or embroidery. But the type of clothing, the quality of the decoration, and the materials used all indicate status.
Because that doesn't happen in Europe.
No,
Nope.
not at all.
Okay.
For all people in Europe just wear armor in this D&D world. They just all the Europeans just wear armor. So they don't rank you by your clothing; they rank you by your armor. The most common materials used in making clothing are cotton and silk. Okay. However, other materials are also used, generally confined to a specific region and to lower classes. These materials include pounded tree bark, flax, wool, woven horsehair, furs, paper, and hemp. I don't know why furs wouldn't be seen as exotic. Heavy leathers would be used for durability, while soft leathers like deerskin would be used for items requiring flexibility or lavish decoration, except furs are only worn by the poor. They just said that.
Every important character in a medieval fantasy thing has a fur like neck cape thing. So it's like it's weird to not whatever.
Yeah, it's weird. Okay. Primitive tribesmen and poor commoners would use the cheapest, most available materials for their clothing. White is typically the color of mourning, so nearly all cloth is dyed. That's truth.
And remember,
Sure.
we are making these statements about everyone in Kara-Tur.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Common
All
color.
four nations and your bandits and your tribes folks.
Common
Everyone.
colors are browns, ochres, yellows, grays, and blues. The brighter colors of green, pinks, and reds are rarer and are commonly worn by those of higher station. Dyes are made from flowers, nuts, barks, woods, and certain materials and minerals. You know what I'm seeing here? They're going into such lavish detail about how they make their clothing. They're like, oh, they make their dyes from flowers and nuts and barks. How primitive. As if how do they make dyes in Europe?
Yeah, I was just gonna say they get them from Asia.
They get them from Asia.
And it's confusing why they even talk about this stuff. Because if I told this to my players, they'd be asleep in about 5 seconds.
Yeah, let's just skip this part because I want to get to the paragraph that I think is just the pinnacle the pinnacle of D&D
Goody.
racism. Let's go to food, because we all love
Hey.
food. We love talking about food.
Eh,
Get your
Okay, I'm going to
clips ready.
read this, and get ready. Get ready. Get ready to throw out those. I want to see all the Why Garys. All you subscribers. I want to see
got
the
it going.
I want to see the Why Garys here. Rice is the one constant throughout the civilized lands of Kara-Tur. Everyone eats rice, and rice, in one form or another, is served with virtually every meal. In Sholung and Tulung, people do not greet each other with the friendly hello of the West, instead saying, "Have you eaten rice today?" The intention is the same, but the importance of rice in daily life is clear. Rice is used in a multitude of ways. It is boiled and served as a main course. It is cooked into a paste-like gruel. Leftover rice is mixed with meats and vegetables. It is vinegared, shaped, and served cold. It is, from a more practical side, protection from wars and revolts. All have solid wooden floors and chambers divided by movable screens.
Wait.
Did you
Oh, we,
skip something?
we skipped.
It's pounded and crushed and made into rice
My
cake.
PDF is missing a page.
Oh, very interesting.
So rice is pounded and crushed and made into rice cakes. It is ground into flour and formed into buns or noodles. It is mashed, fermented, and made into sake, a strong drink. Like wheat in the West, rice is the stuff of life in Kara-Tur.
Have you eaten rice today?
No.
That's how we should
Data-
greet each other. We should be like, "Have you eaten rice today, listeners?"
Yeah. Data, can I just say, I got so confused when you said rice from a more practical side is protection from wars and revolts. And I was like, what?
I believed you.
Well, I
Sure,
believed
sure.
it. I believed it because the writing in this book is god awful. So I was like, "Oh, okay, they're just gonna say rice protects you
No.
from war." Sure.
I've got my rice shield. I've got my rice guandao, like,
oh my rice.
like all that.
Well,
So the-
if we're making them into rice cakes, why wouldn't they be great as armor? Come on, like
Sure.
Like
next-
I would go into like a whole other thing about how, first of all, you can't grow rice everywhere, so why would they be eating rice?
Well,
But
let's get to the
that's
next paragraph because
Let's
we
keep
can talk
going
about
because I
millet
can't read
and
this
sorghum.
because everyone else has to read it.
So Paulina, you're right into. Let's talk about rice when it's not available.
when rice is not available or too valuable to serve at the common table, yellow millet, sorghum, or barley is often substituted.
So
This
rice is not a constant.
Well, first of all, like,
This is the poor man's food.
see, this is the opposite in Asia because, I mean, rice is the every person's food, first of all, and so is millet in Asia. It just depends on how you cook it. Millet is a northern Chinese thing,
Uh-huh.
and rice is a southern Chinese thing, historically, not in the present. Now, why? Because you can't grow rice in northern Asia. It doesn't grow there. It's impossible. But you can grow millet. That's why. Not for these moronic reasons. Oh, that hurts me. So that paragraph, the have you eaten rice
that's
today?
one sentence. That's one sentence.
That hurts me.
Let's keep going.
Yeah.
These are normally pounded into cakes or cooked into a thick gruel like rice was. Beans of various sizes, shapes, and colors are also used in addition to or in place of rice. Once again, rice is not a constant. Soybeans, red beans, black beans, and brown beans may all be stewed or mashed into a paste. This paste may be fermented, flavored, dried, or sweetened. It is used as a dip, stuffed into beans, formed into candies, or used as a sauce. From soybeans comes the unusual, unprepared foods, soy sauce, and tofu. Tofu is prepared from the juice or milk of mashed soybeans. It is curdled and pressed into semi-soft cakes. It may be stewed, dried, deep fried, or prepared in a variety of other ways. Soy sauce is prepared through a complicated process of mashing, fermenting, soaking, and rinsing. And the end result is a thin, salty sauce used as a flavoring for nearly anything.
They're talking about soy sauce.
This is very detailed. This is a lot of
You know
like,
what this sounds
is
like?
before soybean.
This sounds like a white person went to Asia and wrote about it on their travel blog.
Yeah, it sounds like a voiceover for like a travel channel show. Like, it's...
Now, here's the thing, and the reason why I took such offense to have you eaten rice today, because they're talking about the China proper in this world, is that like the act, and I mean, I know most Asians might understand this, but the act of telling someone or having your parents say, "Have you eaten today?" is more than just a greeting. That's I love
yeah.
you. That's I love you.
Yeah.
No, oh shoot. So I have a pin. So there's a Filipino bakery in Seattle, and they have a pin that says "Have you eaten yet?"
Yeah.
And and it's on a heart. And I was like, that's the pin I'm getting, and it's somewhere in my house. It might be on my jean jacket, but it was just like,
I gotta get that. I gotta get something like that.
Hood Famous in Seattle, I think it's called.
And the
One day.
text treats like have you eaten like it's an unusual thing to say. When my white mom asks that all the time, like people just ask that because food is like one of the things that you need to survive, and it's like everyone asks that.
White people do this too. This is not a weird thing.
No,
How
but
many times does your mom
they
call
said, have
you?
you
It's
eaten
like-
rice today?
And that's exactly it. That's the way you otherize it.
Also,
But I can
kanji,
guarantee you-
kanji sounds better than gruel. Why say gruel?
Yeah, I don't know. Or juke. Like it's
Yeah.
there are other words that it's also just like, by the way, gruel is porridge, which Europeans eat.
Mm-hmm.
The in-text depth of like soy sauce and like tofu and like how like it's created reminds me of Unbreakable, where if this was written by an Unbreakable writer with like the sensitive readers and all that good stuff, this would be a sidebar that is there because that soy sauce manufacturing process is so important to the story that we're going to give you the context and the meaning of it. It wouldn't be written in this very like anesthetic kind of way where it was said be like, soy sauce is hard to make, tofu is hard to make, here's how we do it. It's very intensive and it's very meaningful. And like, I can't help but think that like, man, this has a place. This was not how to execute on it.
Okay, so I'm gonna suggest that we skip to page 140, go over religion, law and justice, which I think is important, and then I have 2 page 140s. I'm gonna say that the Trove let me down.
We were using the same one, I think. So I don't know what's
Yeah,
going on here.
same.
Daniel, do a refresh, but I'm happy to read some religion here.
Yeah.
So I'm Vietnamese background. Religion is a very interesting topic from recent like last century. Anyways, the average man of Kara-Tur does not attend a church or temple on a regular basis. Indeed, the concept of a church as a separate entity clearly identified from all others is somewhat strange to him. For him, religion organized on such a scale does not exist. However, this does not mean the average man is not pious in respect of religion, nor that the temples and monasteries are in total anarchy. Don't write that. It is just that the attitude towards religion is vastly different. There are several different religions of Kara-Tur, each with its own set of beliefs and practices. There's like 4. The Way, the Path of Enlightenment, the 8 million God. Oh, okay. Ancestor worship, the cult of the state, and more.
I love how it's just different religion. What's your religion? Ancestor worship.
The cult of the state sounds like Gygax's political take on 20th century China.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Like,
No way.
I also do love that they it's only men.
Oh, yeah. So of course, this whole
Of
book
course.
is only
Like it. No. Okay. Yeah.
One of the most frequent feedbacks we get on this like project is that, oh, it's a different time. It's the 80s. Men was like very gender neutral. And I will fight that to the end of my life. Like that is not the case here. It is very clearly like a statement.
Oh yeah, no, it's that's a thing. I occasionally still read this in academic stuff. They will use man as the gender neutral, and I'm like, no, this has not been a thing since the 70s. Like,
yeah,
it's just
yeah.
Moving on here.
Let's keep moving.
Each is distinct, teaching enlightenment, perfection, and salvation according to its own methods. Each believes it is the correct path. However, in practice, few common people follow the beliefs of strictly one religion, and so they take no chances, not wishing to offend one deity or another. As a result, commoners make offerings, listen to sermons, celebrate holy days, and pray at temples of many different religions. This is not considered unusual or incorrect. I might skip the next paragraph here.
Let's just
So I think that
the next 2 paragraphs are skippable.
It gives you just how religion is represented.
They say that sects fight with one another. There are feuds, violent clashes, as if that isn't the case in any religion in Europe.
But then that contradicts what they said that like the various religions are extremely tolerant of one another.
Yeah.
It's so it seems so unnecessary to say things like they sometimes have conflicts, as if Europe doesn't have a history of religious conflict.
Oh no.
No, that's not conflict because the
Liked by everybody.
Crusades were a one-sided, just completely one-sided thing.
As we all know.
I love how these emotes in chat are getting some real good use. I need to see more Steves though. I don't see enough Steves in the chat because I know the Steve emote works.
The Steve emote is for tier 2 subs.
It's highly sought after.
It's highly sought after.
It's a scarcity.
Okay.
It's okay.
Steve is locked. Okay, we got to unlock Steve. I think we'll figure that out in the future.
So Daniel, where did you want to take us? So we were talking about
I want to talk about law and justice, mostly because I want to see how people have certain perceptions of law, order, and justice in China. For instance, like Jackie Chan's son actually went to prison for drugs. And he could have actually faced the death penalty. And so the idea of what is a punishable crime in Asia is very different than it is, in the West. There we go. There's some Steves. Oh, that's Drew. Nice.
I'm here for.
So let's just go through. Do we want to do the law and justice?
Dan, have you read ahead? Is there like a choice paragraph that you'd like to kind of use?
No, I was just legitimately curious, but now that I'm kind of like going through it, it's all pretty standard. It's like they're like, in the case of involves a murder, a spellcaster may be summoned to use his spells to speak to the dead person.
Well, okay, so here's something right here. It's sort of on the right-hand side of page 140, midway down. Maybe a little bit further. Punishments are fixed by law, but the magistrate has some power to interpret the law and alter the fixed punishment to one of lesser or greater severity. For commoners, typical punishments include execution, branding, loss of the hands, payment of fines, imprisonment, banishment, slavery, the wearing of a heavy yoke, and public announcements of their crimes. So again, jumping to this idea that their laws are draconic,
good
that
find.
they are overtly savage, as if we didn't have like drawing and quartering in Europe.
Yeah, I know, right? Tarred and feather.
Yeah. It's
Honestly,
it's just,
I'm going along with that. I'm honestly surprised that they use the term vendetta as opposed to like having pick something different.
Yeah.
Like they talk a lot about vendettas. And I'm like, okay, you use that Italian word.
And I think it also harkens back to I don't remember which episode, but when you were talking about how in this sort of Oriental Adventure setting, it's the idea that people, once they attain power, they use it to press everyone else down.
Yeah.
Through inhumane treatment.
Well, because we touched on that in the weapons section, because we know that commoners don't have swords because the authority takes away all their weapons. They're oppressed. Asian people are oppressed by both law and in practice.
I want to adopt Mahar's take on it, where he just said, once you attain power, that power is cruel. And I think that's a very good way to like encapsulate the feeling here. Even with like high magic spells, the Western counterpart is like a thing, and the Eastern counterpart, the Oriental counterpart, is just cruel.
Oh yeah, the magic here is, they literally put, it's as if J.K. Rowling, who is also a piece of shit, took those 4, was it the forbidden spells, and then straight out of this book, because they're actually in this book.
Oh yeah.
Oh, well that's...
Yeah, D&D's got some problems with like taking away agency from players. But let's move on. We are literally on the last page. Literally on the last page. And we have about 5 minutes left. Now, I want to read about manners, and I kind of want to end it there. Because, let's be honest, in was it Swords of the Daimyo? There is actually a table for making names. They also have tables for making names in 5th edition D&D as well. The people of Kara-Tur, it is noticed by Gaijin, are extraordinarily polite as a rule. You ever been to Asia? Like, have Try being polite in contemporary Asia whilst driving a car. Impossible.
Also, I just love that. What's actually kind of interesting about this phrase is that it actually kind of implies that this whole book is written by Gaijin.
Yeah, Volo himself might have written it.
Because it's like, as it is noticed by a Gaijin is in that phrase. And so if we interpret this whole book as written by like a Marco Polo-esque character.
Elminster himself, Volo, who knows? There are many of those characters in the D&D world. But yeah, this sounds like it's written by... Wait, the meta is that it's written by a white person, and in reality, it was also written by 3 white dudes. Oh, snap.
I love that.
It's called method acting.
Yeah. They often go to meticulous pains to behave in the correct manner. Indeed, among the higher classes, incorrect or poor manners is virtually as great a crime as murder. And severe punishments can be levied upon those who knowingly or unknowingly commit some social faux pas. I love how they put faux pas in there first.
Drew, it looks like you're like swearing on a Bible with that like pose right there. It's like...
If I could just point out really quick, they say extraordinary polite as a rule, and then they talk about how it is as great a crime as murder and severe punishments can be levied against them.
Yeah,
which is pointing out that in Oriental Adventures, Kara-Tur folks are bound by law to be this way, and if they aren't, they will naturally become savage and barbaric.
Yep.
Right? That it's only these
they're in need
rules,
of saving.
Yeah, it's only these rules that are making them act nice.
I like this Marco Volo thing that people are talking about.
Oh, that's excellent! I'm so happy about that. But also you pointing that out, that also reminds me of some of the stuff that goes on in the 4E the Drow City, where there's like those magical policemen that if you step out, they like murder you.
Oh, that Menzo Baranzan.
Yeah. I ended up having to figure this out because I accidentally picked being a dark elf for something else, and I was like, oh, I didn't realize how much baggage this came with. Because I didn't read that part.
Oh, the evil sun.
Yeah. Okay.
Also, if if they're subterranean, why is their skin dark?
Yeah, I don't want to go into that. But
why is their skin dark?
Because
racism.
Because they're evil and their curse is to be black. That's literally like basically the how Drow work, and it's disgusting, and I hate it.
Honestly, if you're a subterranean species, ancestry, or race, wouldn't tremor sense make more sense? Dark vision is the concept of dark vision is really stupid for a subterranean race, because the way you navigate underground and the way any biological entity navigates a subterranean world is not through vision.
Well, and that it even like Drow have this sort of yellow peril thing going for them too, because they're always like just under the surface, and they're, despite the fact that they can't really, because of like sunlight sensitivity, they can't really function well above ground, but they always want to get above ground. So they're coming for your ass, but you'll never see it till they're right there because they're below.
I think that's just fear of people of color.
Fear of the unknown. Fear,
yeah. It's
fear of others.
Okay, so sorry, Steve.
I was gonna say, I mean, going into that yellow peril, like in Drow society, men are femicized and they are just like completely useless, whereas women are the ones you have to worry about. Women are the ones that are most dangerous, like dragon ladies.
Like dragon ladies, yeah. Oh, that's a really good point, Steve.
Dragon ladies and tiger moms.
And tiger moms.
Yeah. Anyways.
Okay.
There's so
correct
much.
manners. Mark clearly did. I'm just waiting for them to say bow.
It's waiting for you.
Correct manners mark clearly the differences between various social classes, and perhaps more importantly, help prevent the possibility of embarrassing oneself in public. The latter is of great importance, since there is perhaps no greater sin than to be laughed at by others. Okay. The bow is the most obvious expression of manners. Oh, yes.
There it is. Go for it.
It is not just a way of saying hello.
But I thought you were supposed to ask.
But in Kara-Tur, you would go,
rice?
wait. You would go, have you eaten rice today? That is what they're saying right here. That is literally what they're saying. If you don't bow and say, have you eaten rice today, you will be executed.
Yeah.
It measures the respect one has for the person bowed to. Those of a lower status bow lower to their superiors than their superiors do to them. Indeed, a high-ranking official may barely nod to those under him. The greatest difference one can make is to koto, kneel, and touch one's head to the floor. It is normally done only in the presence of emperors and extremely powerful lords, but is sometimes necessary when apologizing to or begging forgiveness from another. Except in the presence of a powerful lord, kotoing is an extreme act, since it represents the debasement and surrender of the person to another. Good
I
Lord.
feel like whoever wrote this felt really proud of themselves, because I feel like they think they captured something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like detailed and unique, and like I really understand this part of their culture.
This is a rich Oriental world.
Yeah.
I'm
And,
doing
like,
humanity a favor.
Yeah. It's like
Europeans never bowed for any reason. Like,
yeah, it's just
Ugh.
it feels like no, I get this. Believe me, I get this stuff. Like
Jesus.
it's just
Oh, here the next paragraph
Even-
is kind of meh,
Yeah.
but the last one is, we'll finish up our reading with this. It is the great concern over insults to honor and the risk of public ridicule that prompts so much of the politeness. People are just afraid of saving face in Asia, apparently.
Yep.
Thus, the DM is allowed to cause player characters to lose honor when they do things that would bring them ridicule or make them look foolish. Player characters cannot be cavalier in their attitude. They must be careful of all they do.
oh, my players are fucked. My players are done for.
yeah, I was like, how can you even play this game? Like, not like there's so many mechanics where it's like I feel like you would walk into a town and just be beheaded.
Is Steve? Oh, I thought you froze.
No, I'm just done.
Well, good thing we're done, because this is the end of Oriental Adventures by Gary Gygax with David Cook and Francois Marcella Fraudeval. The mysterious and exotic Orient, land of spices and warlords, has at last opened her gates to the West.
Oh geez, oh god, there's so much in that. There's so much in that phrase that is.
So,
God.
we have, over the course of 13 2-hour episodes, finished reading Oriental Adventures. And there's some maps here, but I'm not an architect. But also, there are things these are just pretty standard maps. But over 13 2-hour streams, Steve, myself, and our amazing guests read through this book so you don't have to. Now, for those of you who are watching and are maybe a publisher or anything like that, this is what a sensitivity read looks like. Except we did one for free.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Except we did one for free. So if you're ever wondering, why should you pay a sensitivity reader? Why you should have a sensitivity reader? This is why. This is why.
I can't stop looking at that quote you read at the end, Daniel, because
I know, right?
I'm just like, oh, this has got opened her gates to the West.
Yep.
Just that phrase embodies so much.
it's very like, I don't know, colonial.
It's so colonial.
I
It's
know.
so like the embodiment of the issues that Asian women face with exoticization and not just general fetishization, but particularly sexual fetishization.
Yep.
That it's so inappropriate on so many levels to say a thing like that, even especially in the 80s.
Yep.
Like that's
This book. Okay, so what's our verdict, Steve? After having read the AD&D Oriental Adventures Handbook, I own a physical copy of this book.
Did you pay like full?
No. I paid $15 Canadian for it. So it's like $1 US. Well, actually, not in your economy.
No,
right
not
now.
in our country, but
No.
So, what is our score? Because the next book we read will then be compared to this.
God. Okay. There are some good things in this book. Specifically, the events. The idea that like here's a table of events that could happen, and the events include things like natural disasters and also like social things that happen that actually are very meaningful. Like if someone who is like well respected has a child who gets married, that is a moment to like stop general life and like disrupt it and like do something else. Cool.
Yep. Except for
I
the
love
appearance
that.
of a virtuous maiden, which is one of those.
Yeah, that's a tick. That's several ticks away
Yeah.
from it.
That was the only good chapter in this book because it was the blandest, most generally culturally agnostic chapter in the entire book. It was the least Asian thing in this book, and it's the thing we like the most.
It was the least Asian thing. I resonated a lot, like identify as Asian, with the idea that at festivals, food is given out because from both a game design perspective and a world building perspective, giving your players food to consume is a very meaningful hook and allows you to like explore other themes and is like a great thing just to include in any game. Give your players food, let them interact with the food. That is a very human thing.
yeah.
As such, I give this book a very high score of 1 out of 10.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, for me, book's a solid 1 out of 10. Like, I feel it lays the foundation for all the bad books we're going to read. Now, if you want control over the next book we're going to read, you can vote on Twitter. 181 people have voted so far.
No, what?
And 54% of them want us to read L5R. But there are some vocal people who are actually responding with actual comments. And Peter has just put the tweet in the chat saying that they want us to read Feng Shui. Now, as a huge John Woo fan, having seen every John Woo movie, even the bad ones, even the movie that served as a pilot for a TV show starring Dolph Lundgren, I have a deep love of Hong Kong action cinema. Sure. So even if that doesn't become our main series, I'm still going to read Feng Shui on stream. We're still going to do something like that. But vote. Go to our Twitter page. It is now pinned to our Twitter page. That's AZNS Represent. And vote for the book we're going to read next. Vote for the next... I mean, L5R is a bigger book than this. So that's probably going to be... Steve, we've been doing this since the start of the quarantine.
I know. I'm aware. I will say that L5R, I understand the idea of like people want to see something more recent and they want to see kind of like the story unfold of Asian representation. And I also want to see that story, you know. However, I think a lot of people might be like, I shouldn't speak for them. I get the sense that maybe some reply guys out there,
they think they think we're going to praise L5R.
They think there's gonna be like a lot of improvement, but I have to say that like having done my glances and what have you, I will stick my spade in. The spore, the root of the problems remains.
Oh
the
yeah,
flower, the flower looks different.
We covered L5R a little bit on the third edition one. Remember?
Yeah. It's going to smell a little bit different, but
oh Dan, thank you so much.
Dan, thank you. That's great. That's a lot of emotes.
There's so many emotes now.
Let's get some faces in there. But yeah, I'll end with saying like L5R, I understand wanting to see something more recent to see the progress we've done, because I think the progress is not as much as a lot of people think it might be.
Yeah, I actually mentioned the L5R, the current edition of L5R on the very first episode of the Asians Represent podcast. Because I actually vividly remember getting in the car after having bought it and picking up Sarah, and she was actually holding the bag that I had the games in. I had bought the Delta Green Agent's Handbook, and I had bought the box set for the new L5R edition. And she looked at it, and she's like, is this supposed to be Chinese or Japanese?
Yeah.
And that's like, it's a big sign that this is not the perfect product everyone thinks it is.
And oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh yeah, it's one of those things where like I came across something in this last year. It's not tabletop, but it was a comment that a creator made in a newsletter, and there was a character note that said Pan Asian or Korean.
What?
and if y'all know what I'm talking about, don't say anything. But it was a newsletter that went out about their character development. This was a creator. And I saw that, and I was like, "How the fuck can I keep reading you if I know that that's how you develop stuff?"
Wait, where did this come from? Where did this come from?
It was a comic character development thing in comics, not this, but it's one of those things where this was in the last 12 months, and so you all saying that this edition is not going to be as different as some people might be suspecting is something that I have witnessed in creative communities that exist today that want to have representation of people in their works of
So
different
Pan Asian or Korean.
Pan Asian or Korean. And I remember reading that and this was a newsletter that went out to people subscribe to the newsletter. So I'm probably not the only person of Asian descent who read this phrase.
Yeah.
And I was like, are you like, because this was something that person could have chosen to not send out. It was like, no, it's not like in the body of the thing. It was like in there, like special notes included. And I read that and I was just like, I can't.
Listen.
And so stuff from like even 8 years ago, I can imagine not being.
Listen, days go by, things happen. Things are either Pan-Asian or not Pan-Asian.
They're either Pan-Asian or Korean.
Yeah.
And
This is brutal, but we did it.
Yeah, it's like I had to bring that up in the like last 5 minutes. Oh, I also want to mention Happy Juneteenth to folks.
Yes, Happy Juneteenth.
Like finally, folks in North America, outside of Texas and outside of Black communities, are celebrating this. And like I can definitely admit, this was not a holiday I knew anything about until I was an adult, which I feel really which
Same here.
Terrible. But I want to say Happy to Juneteenth to folks, because it has to be.
It needs to be said. And like I'm super grateful for our community. We did a special stream for Black Lives Matter, and we raised like over $700 US. Y'all are amazing. We're gonna be doing more of this. This was super encouraging. Before we do our sign-offs, Drew, I mean, your socials are down below. You're super active on our Asians Represent Discord.
I play a lot of League.
Play a lot of League. You carry me. You
Talk
and
a lot of shit.
Literally everyone else in the Discord just carries me in League of Legends. It happened today at lunch. That's your social right down there. Paulina, yours is down there. Do you have anything going on?
No. So yeah, my social's there. I'm technically in the Discord. I don't participate right much because there's a lot of stuff going on because I've been participating in my own games and running stuff. I write under my regular name, Paulina Pshisopa, for Women Write About Comics. I sometimes take an anthropology, archaeology angle. Sometimes I just take a how good is this angle. But sometimes I do talk about stuff from an Asian American perspective as well. Specifically, so Women Write About Comics. We just got nominated for an Eisner, actually. Eisner voting ended. Yeah.
What?
The website. Yeah, best comics journalism thing.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so I got to vote in the Eisners, which was super cool.
So you're an Eisner nominated writer.
I am an Eisner nominated writer, which is great. But other than that, I've got my dissertation to work on. But yeah, no,
that's a lot. That's a lot going on.
Yeah. There's a lot.
That's a lot going on. Steve, do you have anything going on? Do you have something that you want to show everyone?
I could show my hard copy of Unbreakable, which is actually underneath a pile of paper.
Why are you treating it like that, Steve?
I had just come out of a very emotional session where we talked about kind of our in-game masks campaign. We've done some like D&D.
I respect that then.
We did a lot of just generally out of character, realigning on like expectations and like how we want to play. So ripping the band off that, if you have D&D groups or like other tabletop RPG groups, totally take a time to be like, you know, this weekly session, let's not play, let's just talk and like call it an hour and be done.
I feel like that's all of our D&D sessions.
No, that's awesome.
But I mean, of course, I'm gonna talk about Unbreakable. If you go to unbreakablerpg.com, you can always scroll to the bottom, fill that form. And if you are an Asian creator, please put down your name. You can participate in the volume 2 in whatever capacity makes sense, whether it's editor, writer, illustrator. I think the more voices we get in there, the better it's going to be. Volume 1 is already a masterwork in that it totally broke the ice and said, hey, these voices are demand. It is a bestseller, and people want to hear Asian stories written by Asians. Volume 2, I am certain, will be even better. Please sign up. Even if this is your first foray into writing. Volume 1 was my first foray, and now I'm best-selling.
Steve and I are best-selling authors.
Awesome.
I actually have, if you're looking at our Twitch page, at the very bottom underneath the screen, you'll see the cover to Unbreakable Volume 1. Click on that, and it'll take you to Drive Through RPG, where you could buy either a PDF or a hardcover copy of this beautiful, beautiful book. That being said, I think we've got one other thing going on. The Asians Represent podcast is making a big return. Dungeons and Asians returns next week. Returns the week of what's the date? The week of the 21st. Dungeons and Asians returns. I can't wait. We just played.
Super excited.
We recorded a session on Wednesday, and I had a lot of fun. I thought it was dope. It was Agatha's introduction to combat.
Yeah, it's our first foray into combat, and combat in D&D is as diverse as any other narrative, and we did a very uniquely us combat, and I'm very happy about it. Won't say any more about that because you gotta wait for that.
It's been really great. For it. You gotta wait for it. But Steve brought up Unbreakable. I've got another thing. I just released a zine. I've never made a zine before. It's called Denizens of Mountains and Seas. It's available on my Patreon, patreon.com/Daniel H. Kwan. It's $3. You can support me this month if you want, or just, continue to support me. $3 gets you a zine that includes 8 monsters from classical Chinese literature, and stats and information that you could use in your OSR or D&D 5th edition games. So yeah, I have that. I just released it today. It's in beta, and now I'm talking to a publisher about publishing it and maybe other volumes.
Awesome.
Or a collection. We'll see. That being said, everyone, our audience, especially our guests and Steve, this has been a journey. This has been a long journey to read what is a 141-page book.
I mean, the important part of the journey was the honor we gained along the way.
I fucking hate that shit. Hate that.
Oh,
thank you.
Oh,
Yeah.
You brought honor to us all.
Oh, you'll bring honor to us all.
Great song.
We know Drew's score is 95 plus, therefore,
of course,
can be considered an Paulina, there is a rule in this book that if your honor score is higher than 95, you are considered an epic hero, or a hero worthy of epics.
Okay.
And you can do it by being a landlord.
You can literally do it by being a landlord. You could do it.
So you said that, and I immediately thought of the main middle-aged woman from Kung Fu Hustle.
Yes.
In the curling.
She runs all the way down the stairs.
Yeah.
You could be her. So in order to do that, according to the rules of this book, which we have learned, you need to. Where's the home ownership? You need to acquire 95 pieces of property in order to be considered a great hero, suitable material for epic songs, lengthy folktales, and the like. So you need to own 95 pieces of property. So if you game the system and buy 95 really small lots, you're a hero.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. That being said, please take care of yourselves. This has been quite the journey reading Oriental Adventures.
Actually, Dan, can I say one more thing before we close out? Steve. I just want to close off by saying that I know that a lot of the viewers, of course, are Asian identified. I hope you found value in this, but a lot of our viewers are not Asian identified. They might be white, might identify as white. this is difficult to go through, and it's difficult to like see the roots of a lot of these like systemic racist problems in tabletop RPGs. And I want to make a very explicit appeal to those who identify as white that if you are complicit in like this system of racist like oppression, you're not a bad person per se. Like it is not a reflection of yourself. If you've run Oriental Adventures, it doesn't make you a bad person. What it does mean is that you, just like me, just like anyone else, are a member of society where that society has really begun to fall prey to white supremacy and other racist connotations. What's most important is that we first recognize all of the problems that exist, we acknowledge them, so that we may begin the very difficult and generally painful process of changing it. So if you are a viewer and you've gotten to this point in time, I want to thank you for at least opening your mind and your heart to the work that we've done here. And I sincerely hope that this has given you enough strength, energy, empowerment to begin enacting change just at your table. I don't think it's up to you to make changes to the system. We will do that together. But if you can make that one change at your table, my entire heart goes out to you, and I love you for your effort.
I love you for your effort, Steve.
Thank you.
One last thing before we sign off. Tomorrow, bonus stream. Tomorrow at noon EST on this channel. Amar, our very own Waleed from Dungeons and Asians, is going to be taking the facilitator reins, and we'll be facilitating a read-through of Al-Qadim Arabian Adventures. It's as bad as it sounds. We're going to have an amazing cast. We have Amr, who is on our Dark Tides of Bilgewater League of Legends read-through. We have Miriam, who was on which episode? Miriam was on an episode with us. I forget which episode of Asians Read because we've done so many. Miriam was on. And then, of course, we have Izza, who was on our 3rd edition art review. And then, of course, we have a brand new guest, Ahmed, coming to us all the way from Jeddah. You can find Ahmed at D20 Arabia RPG on Twitter. We're doing that tomorrow, Al-Qadim, at noon on this channel. It's going to be popping. I can't wait. Steve and I will be behind the scenes. You won't have to hear our voices for 2 hours, but you will hear 4 amazing voices who need to be heard talking about an equally problematic book. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to us diversifying the number of books and the number of people who you see on these screens. So yeah, we'll see all of you tomorrow at noon. Thank you for tuning in to the last episode of our Oriental Adventures read-through. We will be returning, by the looks of it, with something L5R. With something L5R. We'll be returning with something like that. Have a good night, everyone. Please take care of yourselves. Take some time to decompress. I love all of you. And join our Discord. Peter, throw our Discord up on the chat. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
And thank you to our mod, Peter. Come on, like Peter is amazing.
Yeah.